mine probably went more around change and adoption within the HR function, because I think from my experience, you need to have that shift in mindset, culture, capability within the function to really scale analytics across the organization. You can have very engaged business leaders and teams, but if you haven't got your HR business partners or even your centers of excellence really singing from the same hymn sheet on it, it makes it challenging to really scale and adopt. So things that have kind of worked for us is I would say having a rolling list of activities and initiatives. I think there's definitely no silver bullet on this one either, of going it's these three things and it's worked every single time. So like ranging from more traditional kind of training and adoption type activity to sort of more drop-in lunch and learn type sessions to deep dive initiatives on particular programs that are relevant to the organization as well, and almost having I'm doing a circular motion because we sort of had a wheel of activity, if you like, of about 8 or 9 different things that, depending on the stakeholder, depending on the population, we'd sort of deploy and use across the areas as well. I think also making it pragmatic, practical and transparent, kind of linked to the earlier point in terms of engaging stakeholders. I think it's very applicable here. It needs to be things that people understand, can make the connection back to what they're doing from a day-to-day perspective versus a nice sophisticated model or piece of analysis and chart that no one can interpret, even though the outcome might be the right answer. Something that I've used at all of the organizations I've been at is around champions and ambassadors. So really hooking into those slightly more geeky business partners, those ones who do get it and understand it, and really using them as a bit of a voice to bring others with them around it, and having that kind of ambassador network where it's definitely a two-way dialogue. On one, more the push out from the analytics team of going, this is what we're doing, this is why we're doing it, and here are some of the solutions and tools, but also using them as a bit of a sounding board back in as well, in terms of where the priorities need to be, where the pain points are, and what's working and what isn't working, kind of as well. So definitely that. And I think lastly, there's always a bit of carrot and stick on it as well in terms of it. So I've pushed hard in organizations around sort of objectives and making it very well ultimately linked to performance and reward, and in terms of for particularly business partners, of using data, using analytics is your job, is part of your job. It's not a nice to have, it's there and required. So I think sort of that equally has been successful in the past as well.
Great. No, and those are all very, very sensible ideas. I like your idea of sort of champions and ambassadors. Do you actually engage them in some of the prioritization conversations as well? Is that something you do to help you?
Yeah, up to a point. I think there's an element of kind of, from our team's perspective, we need to make sure that we are really aligned to those real strategic priorities, because I think if there's a blank piece of paper going, well, what's the hot topic at the moment, then you'll end up with a list of 25 things and not do a very good job of delivering any of them. So I think we sort of hold the line quite clearly on those more strategic priorities at the headline level. But I think there's definitely a dialogue around actually maybe there's where we're thinking about deep dives, for example, on particular topics, whether it's, I don't know, diversity or hotspots on attrition, for example, and the like as well. Using them as a bit of that sounding board to actually go, well, actually, is that really where we want to focus, and maybe tweak some of the scope and the way that we approach them is the way that we'd use that group.
Right. And any areas you'd sort of, exercise some caution and there might be some dragons there.
Yeah, I think there's always some dragons there, and from my experience, I think some of the sort of lessons learned is there isn't one size fits all within HR. I think business partners, centers of excellence, HR operations, shared service teams clearly all have different requirements, whereas maybe there's a bit of a broad brush approach taken sometimes of going, you all need to be data driven, you all need to be focused on this, and actually what's needed across those different roles and responsibilities is actually quite different. And even again in global organizations, if you're looking after a region versus a country versus a business unit, there are nuances as part of that. So I think thinking about how you build that change and adoption plan to cater to that. Clearly, you can't have 50,000 different versions of everything, but I think at least recognizing that is important, and calling that out whenever you're engaging with those different stakeholders, kind of as well. I think sort of a common theme probably talks about in all of these different areas is not forcing things out. So although we as a people analytics team might think it's a great product and a great solution, having that two-way dialogue, really testing it, really kicking the tires on it before going, right guys, this is the answer, off you go, what more do you want, guys? Clearly isn't the best way to engage. So I think again that sort of two-way dialogue, really testing and embedding is around it as well. And I think this is a slightly broader kind of observation. I think the whole area of analytics, there's a lot of buzzwords in it, whether it's kind of data driven, I've used it today, like insight led, evidence based, all of these different kind of buzzwords. I think there's an element of it's steering away from those a little bit more now and making it much more practical. What does that really mean? What does insight really mean? And bringing that to life for people, rather than just, you should be insight led as a business partner. Great. What tools can we give them to actually do that? What does that actually look like from an outcome perspective? So I think translating some of these buzzwords into reality, again, is something which isn't easy, and again is different depending on who you're talking to, but I think is important.
Yeah, I think that's right. Sometimes the language can really get in the way, can't they, of a good conversation and actually, delivering something that's actually a benefit to your HR colleagues, and they'll actually run with and hopefully drive some value to your people and to the business, right?
Yeah, definitely.
So just one thing on that extracurricular question is we've been sort of working on this question with some of our clients at the moment, and one of the things that's come up is this sort of concept that's used in change management a lot, which is around hearts and minds, which is, I think, perhaps sometimes there's an assumption that shall we say, some of the challenges around people analytics is almost a sort of a technical understanding, or a sort of an intellectual sort of intellectual question. And just wonder that perhaps some of it might actually be more sort of behavioural and attitudinal. I don't know if you've got any examples or where you would stand on that point.
I think, I'd definitely be in the latter camp of it. It's around mindset and culture ultimately of and behaviours of how people see it and value it, as opposed to the technical side. Like we don't need BPs, we don't need centre of excellence teams to be data scientists and to be doing the analytics. That's what the analytics team's there for. But I think the gaps at the moment is really seeing the connection and how it can really deliver benefit for them day in, day out as part of their roles and responsibilities as part of it. I think ever since pretty much I've been in this space, that's been probably the biggest challenge around this, and bringing that broader function and capabilities when they're dealing with sort of day-to-day issues, day-to-day business issues. They haven't got time to necessarily invest in having to do a bit of work for themselves as part of it. But I think the translation of seeing it as work versus actually it's something that will actually help me and deliver on what I need to do and add value to the business that I'm supporting. So definitely it's for me the number one enabler to really bring the broader function and capabilities as part of it.
Yeah, and we've been doing some interviews recently, one of our clients, and we've definitely been interviewing some HR business partners who have a very strong desire. I mean, I'm thinking more technical businesses now, is they want to bring sort of evidence and some options and some choices to the business around the people. So they're a big driver of demand now, I think, for the agenda for the people analytics team is we don't want to bring, to have a gut feel decision on this. We actually want to see what the data tells us. I don't know if that's something you've seen, that pull through.
Definitely, yeah. I think without doubt, it's moved and moving in the right direction, without shadow of a doubt. And I think the appetite's definitely there. I think the understanding on the roles and responsibilities and the accountabilities across those different roles, I think, is still blurry in terms of the expectation of what a business partner should be self-serving and self-sufficient on versus the analytics team's there to deliver insights to me for me to then deliver to the business. I think some of that still exists, and I think solving for that is difficult. There's a lot of dependencies on that, having the right technology, having the right trust in the data, all of those different things kind of inform how much you can push across those different roles and responsibilities. But I think, to me, that's kind of the next pain point once there's been engagement in it, is actually who really should be doing what, and what is the role and responsibilities across it. I think if you've got the right technology in place, it's a huge step in the right direction, and you can draw clearer lines between it. I think if you're sort of straddling between tech, Excel, spreadsheets and the like, it starts to become a bit more tricky in terms of what the right boundaries should look like.
Great. And then, Ollie, are there sort of particular kind of plans, what's next at PMI to take this whole, sort of change and adoption sort of piece forward?
Yeah, well, we've actually recently just kicked off an overall capability program across the whole of P&C, of which ironically data driven is one of those topics. So it's one of the three. So we're sort of running what we're calling boot camps for subsets of the organisation to basically go through sort of data literacy. So that is a bit more on the, not to say pure technical side, but a bit more around what does that really mean and kind of look like. Then the sort of problem solving, hypothesis development of going, what are the right questions to really think about, and how do you ask the right questions and engage stakeholders on it. And then from a kind of output perspective, what does that really look like as well? So we've sort of done a couple of those in pilot across the population and had reasonably good feedback across them. So we're starting to sort of scale those a little bit more now and engage a slightly broader population.
That's great. That's awesome. Well, Ollie, thank you so much for making yourself available today. I mean, some absolutely brilliant sort of suggestions and things for people to think about. So thank you again. And yeah, look forward to catching up again soon.
No problem. Really good to connect. Thanks, Julian.
Thank you, Ollie.